The first time my daughter mentioned the man under the house, I laughed. She was sitting in the hallway outside her room, coloring on the hard wood with a broken green crayon while late afternoon light came through the blinds in long pale bars. She was 5 years old enough to talk in complete, unsettling sentences. Young enough that I didn't think I needed to take them seriously. Without looking up, she said, "He doesn't like when you walk too loud." I was carrying a box of books at the time and nearly dropped it. "Who doesn't?" She pointed at the floor vent with the crayon. "The man under the house." Then she went back to coloring. That was 2 weeks after we moved into the place on Rose Hill Road. The house was older than we wanted and a little more expensive than we could comfortably afford, which is usually how people end up buying houses like that. Built in the late 50s, 1 story, 3 bedrooms, low ceilings. Original hardwood under layers of bad refinishing. From the road it looked harmless, faded blue siding, sagging porch, thin patchy lawn. My wife Andrea loved it immediately. "It has good bones," she said the first time we walked through. People always say that about houses that are going to cost them money. But still, I understood what she meant. The rooms had an honest sort of wear. Not neglect exactly, just age. The place felt lived in, settled. Like if you fixed a few things and painted over the yellowing trim, it could become the kind of house a family stayed in. After years of apartments, that was enough for us. I was 34 and doing residential electrical work for a company that underpaid me and overbooked every week. Andrea worked front desk at a dental office 3 mornings a week while Ellie was in kindergarten. We weren't desperate, but we were tired of rent climbing, tired of thin walls, tired of pretending the next place would somehow be easier to get. So when the inspection came back with only minor issues, old ductwork, moisture in the crawl space, signs of prior rodent activity, I told myself those were normal words for an old house. The seller knocked a little off the price. The bank approved us. We closed in June. By July, the house had started introducing itself, not in dramatic ways at first, just sounds. A faint shifting beneath the hallway at night, a soft tap from somewhere inside the vents. Once or twice, what sounded like movement under the kitchen floor after midnight. Too deliberate for pipes, too slow for an animal. I went under the house twice in those first weeks with a flashlight and a respirator, crawling through dirt and insulation while my shoulders scraped beams blackened with age. I found nothing. No fresh droppings, no torn barrier, no sign that anyone was getting in from outside. Just old ductwork, cinder block, damp earth, and the sour shut-in smell crawl spaces always seem to have. Andrea heard it too. "Mice?" she asked one night as we lay in bed listening to a scratch move slowly from one end of the house to the other. "That's too heavy for mice." "Then what?" I listened another few seconds. "Raccoon, maybe? Under the floor? It happens." She turned toward me in the dark. "You don't sound convinced." I wasn't. But I also didn't want to say what the sound really reminded me of. A person crawling. The next morning I bought traps, reinforced the mesh around the exterior vents, and called a pest guy who charged me $180 to shine a flashlight through the access hatch and tell me he didn't see much. "Probably something small," he said. "Old houses hold noise." That should have been the end of it. Instead, Ellie kept talking about him. Never dramatically, never like a child asking for help. Just the way you might mention a neighbor. "He was humming last night. He doesn't like the cold air. He said not to cover the vent in my room." Andrea told me that last one while I was unloading groceries. She said, "What?" She said the man under the house doesn't like when her rug covers the vent. Andrea gave a quick smile that didn't quite become one. I told her to stop saying weird things like that. What did she say? Andrea looked at me for a moment before answering. She said, "It's okay, Mama. He only comes up when you're sleeping." Something cold moved through me. I set the grocery bag down on the counter. "You think she heard something?" I asked. "From outside, maybe?" Andrea crossed her arms. "I think she's 5. Yeah. But neither of us sounded convinced. That night after Ellie fell asleep, I pulled the vent cover off the floor in her room and aimed a flashlight down into the duct. Dust, metal, darkness. Nothing looking back. Still, I put the cover back on more carefully than I had taken it off. A week later, I woke up at 2:13 in the morning to the sound of something moving directly beneath our bed. Not scratching, not settling. Moving. A slow, deliberate drag beneath the floorboards, followed by one soft knock from below. Andrea stirred beside me. "Did you hear that?" I was already sitting up. The sound came again, passing under the room toward the hallway. Then another faint knock. Then silence. I got out of bed, grabbed the aluminum bat from the closet, and stood in the hallway listening. The house was dark except for the blue glow of the microwave clock in the kitchen. 2:13, it read. Ellie's bedroom door was cracked open. Beyond it, I could see the yellow halo of her nightlight. Then, from somewhere under the hallway, I heard a voice. Not loud, not clear, but unmistakably a voice. A man whispering through cupped hands. I moved toward Ellie's room before I realized I had started holding my breath. When I pushed her door open, she was sitting up in bed. "Daddy?" she said sleepily. I lowered the bat. "Yeah, baby, it's me." She rubbed one eye. "He was talking." Every muscle in my body tightened. Who was? She pointed at the floor beside the vent. "A man under the house." I checked the closet, the window, under the bed, then crouched by the vent and listened with one hand still gripping the bat. But nothing. No voice, no movement. Just a faint metallic smell of the duct and the sound of Ellie breathing behind me. I tucked her back in and sat in the hallway until dawn. The next day, I took off work and hired a foundation and moisture company to inspect the crawl space. 2 men came out in overalls, crawled under the house, spent 40 minutes checking beams and duct lines, then emerged dirty and annoyed. Their lead guy, Morales, wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist. "Structurally, it's not great," he said, "but it's not collapsing either. Moisture's higher than I'd like, and you've got some old tunneling from animals, but nothing active. So no person could get in from outside?" He looked at me strangely. Not unless they were folded in half." I gave a little laugh like I was joking. He didn't. That evening I installed a motion alarm on the crawl space hatch outside, the kind that screamed as the latch moved. I also set a trail camera facing the hatch and another in the hallway pointed toward Ellie's room. Andrea watched me do it without commenting until I came back inside. "You think someone's getting in under the house?" I think I'd feel better ruling it out. She leaned against the counter, exhausted in the way only working parents can be exhausted. "And if it's not someone?" I looked at her. Neither of us said the obvious thing. At 2:13 the next morning, the motion alarm outside went off. A hard electronic shriek that snapped both of us awake. I was halfway out of bed before Andrea turned on the lamp. "Call the police," she said. I grabbed the bat, ran through the kitchen, and yanked open the back door. The alarm had already stopped. The yard lay under moonlight, wet grass, fence line, tools leaning against the shed. The crawlspace hatch hung open 6 inches. I stood there barefoot on the patio, staring at it. Then, from inside the house behind me, Ellie screamed. I ran back through the kitchen so fast I nearly slipped on the tile and hit the hallway in time to see Ellie standing in her doorway crying. Andrea kneeling in front of her, both of them staring at the floor vent. The vent cover had been lifted from one side, just enough to leave a black gap beneath it. I bent, seized the grate, and pulled it free. The duct below was too narrow for a grown man. Dust coated the metal. Nothing moved in the beam of my flashlight. But caught in the corner of the vent was a long gray hair. Not dog hair, not mine, not Andrea's. Too coarse, too long. I held it between 2 fingers and felt my stomach turn. The police came, looked around, wrote down what they needed to write down, and left without saying anything useful. One officer suggested raccoons. Another suggested Ellie might have kicked the vent loose in her sleep. I showed them the hair. The older officer bagged it without interest and said they'd note it. Nothing ever came of it. The trail camera outside had captured a single frame before the alarm triggered. A blurred pale shape low to the ground near the hatch. Too close to the lens to identify. The hallway camera had glitched at exactly 2:13, freezing for 23 seconds before resuming with Ellie already in the doorway. Andrea wanted to go stay with her sister. I should have agreed immediately. Instead, I said, "Give me one more day." She stared at me. One more day for what? To find out what's under the house. Her face changed when I said it. Not anger at first, recognition. Like she had just seen something in me that had been there longer than either of us wanted to admit. What's under the house is not more important than our daughter. I know that. Then act like it. I slept on the couch that night because she was too angry to speak to me, and I was too ashamed to defend myself. But shame wasn't the whole truth. Something else had gotten into me by then. Need, maybe. Obsession. The need to see it for myself. To force the thing under the house into a shape I could understand. The next afternoon, while Andrea took Ellie to her sister's place, I called in sick. Bought heavier coveralls, knee pads, a better flashlight, a better respirator, and a length of rope. Around noon, with the house silent above me, I opened the crawlspace hatch and went under. The access opening was behind a row of overgrown hydrangeas. You had to crouch low to get in, then pull yourself the first few feet through packed dirt before the clearance improved enough to crawl. By the second beam, daylight had already narrowed behind me. My flashlight caught suspended dust, old fiberglass insulation hanging in strips, sweaty pipes, silver duct runs, and rough floor joists. Every sound I made, fabric scraping dirt, elbows dragging, my own breathing inside the respirator, came back to me dulled and close. The smell was stronger than before. Damp soil, rust, old wood. And underneath it, something sweet and rotten. I followed the duct line toward Ellie's room. Halfway there, I found a place in the dirt where something had been lying. A long, shallow depression between the support piers, shaped almost like a body. I stopped crawling. The flashlight trembled in my hand. I told myself it could have been anything. A large animal, a patch of shifted earth, my own mind forcing intent out of the shape of dirt. Then I found the pile. Wedged between two piers was a neat little collection of objects. A pink plastic barrette, one of Ellie's socks, a spoon from our kitchen set, and 3 baby teeth. Not in a box, not wrapped in tissue, just resting together in the dirt as if they had been arranged. I backed up so fast my shoulder struck a beam. Something moved deeper in the crawl space. Not near me, farther in. A soft shift, then a drag. I killed the flashlight without thinking, and the darkness became absolute. I could hear my own breathing, loud and shallow inside the respirator. Then a whisper. Not words at first, just breath shaping itself around, almost language. Then, very softly, from somewhere ahead of me in the black, "Daddy?" Every part of me went cold. It was Ellie's voice, but wrong somehow, too flat, too careful. But hers. I lurched backward on my elbows, hitting dirt, pipe, beam, not caring what I scraped. My flashlight snapped back on and flew wild over the crawl space. For one instant, the beam caught something pale sliding behind a support pier. Too long, too thin, gone immediately. I got out so fast I left the rope behind. Outside in the sunlight, I tore off the respirator and threw up in the grass. Andrea came back an hour later with Ellie and 2 overnight bags. She saw my face, looked once at the open hatch, and said, "What did you find?" I told her everything. Not part of it. Not the version that made me sound sane. Everything. To her credit, she didn't laugh. She just listened with Ellie beside her holding a stuffed rabbit. And as I described the things under the house, Andrea's face slowly lost all color. "We're leaving," she said. "Yeah. Right now. Yeah." Ellie tugged on Andrea's sleeve. "But he'll be lonely." Neither of us looked at her. "Ellie," Andrea said carefully, "who told you that?" She shrugged. "He did." I drove them to Andrea's sister's house myself. I didn't argue. I didn't ask them to stay. I kissed Ellie on the forehead while she sat buckled in the back seat, and she whispered, "He said you went down there where he lives." I shut the door and nearly caught my fingers in it. Andrea rolled down the window before pulling away. "You're not going back there tonight." "I know." "Matthew, I know." But after they left, I drove straight back. I wish I could tell you that I had a better reason than fear and stupidity. I wish I could say I went back because I needed clothes or paperwork, or because I was worried the house had been left open. The truth is, I wanted proof. One clean, impossible thing I would never be able to explain away. By the time I got back, the sun was low. The hallway had already gone gray with evening. I walked room to room, turning on every light, then sat at the kitchen table with the bat beside me and the crawlspace key in my pocket. At 2:13, the sound began under the hallway. Not scratching, a crawl. Slow, dragging, deliberate. It moved from the kitchen to the hall, from the hall to Ellie's room, then stopped directly beneath me. The floor vent near the table gave a small metallic click, then another. I stood. Something whispered through the ductwork, too faint to make out, then clearer. "Daddy?" Same wrong, careful voice as before. I backed away from the vent. The whisper moved through the house with impossible speed, passing from one register to the next. Kitchen, hallway, living room, then directly behind me from the vent by the back door. Let me come up. I ran. Not outside, toward the hallway, toward the sound. There's a kind of panic that looks like aggression if you're ashamed enough. I ripped the hallway vent free with my bare hands and dropped to my knees, shining the flashlight into the duct as if I expected a face to be inches away. But nothing. Then the crawlspace hatch outside slammed once, hard. I turned toward the back door. Another slam. Then another. And underneath it, from somewhere below the floorboards, laughter. Not human laughter. Not even close. Just a string of almost human sounds arranged in the shape of amusement. I don't remember deciding to go outside. I remember cold air hitting me, wet grass under my shoes, the hatch shuddering in its frame as something struck it from the inside, not trying to get out, testing it. The flashlight beam shook across the latch. Then the latch went still. Silence settled over the yard. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might black out. Then behind me, from inside the house, Ellie laughed. A perfect imitation. High and bright and small. I made a sound I've never heard out of myself before and stumbled backward away from the house. One of the living room curtains moved, just slightly, as if someone thin had passed behind it. The front door was locked. I knew it was locked. I had locked it myself when I came in. Still, I circled the house and checked every window. Nothing broken, nothing open. When I came back around to the rear, the crawlspace hatch was hanging open. The flashlight beam landed on the black opening and stayed there. At first, I saw only dirt and shadow. Then, very slowly, something withdrew deeper into the dark. A pale shape, long and narrow, folding back in on itself with the smooth motion of a spider disappearing into a crack. I only saw part of it. A stretch of shoulder, maybe. One arm. The curve of a hairless scalp. Fingers too long to belong to a person. And then it was gone. I called the police again, and this time I sounded crazy enough that 2 cars came. They searched the house, checked the hatch, and found nothing except the pile of objects I had described under the house. The younger officer looked shaken by that. The older one looked irritated in the way some people do when they're almost frightened and don't want to admit it. Could be someone has been getting in here, he said. Into a crawlspace too small for a man? He didn't answer. I spent the rest of that night on Andrea's sister's couch. We never slept in that house again. Over the next week, I paid for everything I could think of. Pest control, foundation sealing, new duct covers screwed into the floor, exterior floodlights, cameras, a crew to lay fresh vapor barrier and block every possible access point under the house. I told no one the real reason. To everyone else it was moisture, pests, safety upgrades, old house problems. Then the contractor called. "Mr. Harlan," he said, "we found something you should probably see." I met him at the house an hour later. He was waiting in the yard with 2 other men, and none of them looked eager to explain. "What is it?" I asked. He led me to the open crawlspace hatch. "You said your daughter's room was on the east side?" "Yeah." He pointed under the house. There, in the packed earth directly beneath Ellie's bedroom, was a hollow. Not a tunnel exactly, more like a nest worked into the dirt. Old insulation had been dragged into it. Bits of fabric, hair, bottle caps, toys. And pressed into the back wall of the hollow, arranged in a line, were photographs of us. Andrea carrying groceries, me mowing the front yard, Ellie at the living room window in her pajamas. Pictures taken from inside the house, taken at night. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Were those there before? The contractor asked. I shook my head. He crouched and picked something else up from the dirt with 2 fingers. A small scrap of folded paper. He handed it to me. Inside, in cramped, childish letters, was a single sentence. She talks to me the most. I sold the house 6 weeks later at a loss and never told the buyers why. Judge me for that if you want. I've done it enough for both of us. We moved into a townhouse across the county line with no crawl space, no floor vents, and concrete under the first floor. Ellie stopped talking about the man or the house almost immediately. Kids are terrifying that way. They survive what should scar them, and then ask for cereal like the world has always been safe. For months, she never mentioned him again. Andre and I tried to move on. We failed in quieter ways than you might expect. More locks, nightlights in every room, therapy we could barely afford, long silences after Ellie went to sleep. The kind of damage that doesn't look dramatic from the outside and still changes everything. And then, 3 nights ago, I was tucking Ellie in when she reached down and adjusted the blanket around her stuffed rabbit. And very casually, she asked, "Do you think he got lonely after we left?" I felt all the blood leave my face. Who? She looked up at me as if I had forgotten something obvious. The crawlspace man. I think I managed to ask, "Why would you say that?" She shrugged and settled deeper into bed. "Because last night he was whispering from the bathroom vent," she said. "But he sounded farther away." For more late-night horror, like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves scary stories. I'll see you in the next nightmare. Good night.